Infinite ammo? Check. Rocket launcher? Check. Giant horde of bad guys? Double check. Maybe that was a little too much. Doom Eternal is the much anticipated follow-up to id Software and Bethesda's 2016 highly acclaimed self-titled Doom. Doom 2016, of course, was a much needed and much celebrated return to form, not just for the series, but for the first-person shooter genre as a whole, taking us back to the simpler days where we could just grab a big gun, navigate some corridors, and slay every demon in our way in high-octane frenetic action. I count myself among those who celebrated this return to form, having enjoyed the game enough that after beating it, I upgraded my physical copy to the collector's edition and gave my original copy to a friend so that he could experience the chaos as well. So Doom Eternal arrives on scene in a very challenging situation. Following up something as great as Doom 2016 is an uphill struggle to say the least. For better or worse though, Doom Eternal simply chose not to compete on equal terms. The return to form Doom 2016 was praised for has more or less been abandoned or at least buried beneath many layers of new and additional mechanics that ultimately sway the gameplay meta into something altogether unique. But, and this is very important, it still feels like Doom. I guess in the same way Kaizo Mario still feels like Mario. Doom 2016 purists may find the game overly convoluted, brutally difficult, and unforgiving, and may not at the end of the day find what they're looking for in this title. However, for those a little more open-minded, if you can get over the learning curve, abandon what you knew in the last game, and adjust to this new meta, you may find what is currently one of the best first-person shooters of the modern era. Suffice to say the least, this game is going to be very divisive in its early stages, and what you get out of it is going to depend on how much you can adapt. But adapting is worth every little bit of blood, sweat, and tears that this game will rip and tear out of you. But before we heap more praise onto Doom Eternal without actually explaining why it's so good, let's start by looking at something that I wasn't too fond of and look at the story. So I will be the first to admit, I've never cared for Doom's story. Not in the OG Doom games, Doom 3, 2016, nor here in Doom Eternal. All I really want from these is a little piece of information at the start that says, hey, demons are here, bad stuff gonna happen, take a gun, shoot the bad guy. Some people are really into it and they deeply care about the Doomiverse and its timelines, but to me it's all just... And for the Christians out there, you might want to shield your ears, but to me it's all just... malarkey. Unfortunately, Doom Eternal continues the growing trend of putting a little more focus on story than necessary, with a cast of proper talking paper-thin characters who intermittently monologue at you as you adventure. In short, Earth has been overrun by demons and humanity is near completely eviscerated. However, the demons are not just carnage incarnate, but are rather weapons under the rule of 3 priests who are answering to a being known as the Khan Maker. The Maker here are a race of wannabe divine aliens from a planet known as Urdak. The simple goal here is of course to end the demon invasion by killing the priests and their idol, the Khan Maker. Doom Eternal unfortunately trips over its own feet a few times in trying to tell its story, interrupting the gameplay more often than I would like and for far longer than I would have liked for how kind of lame the story is. Furthermore, contrivances abound as you explore and misplaced cliches and tropes rear their ugly heads. In certain stages, mainly the Earth stages, they make relatively heavy use of what I consider a largely tired trope of the disembodied voices filling the world around you with propaganda. Tropes like this tend to make sense in stuff like Half-Life or Bioshock, but here it comes off as incredibly cliche and lazy, more like other people have done it so we should too. But ultimately these voices lend nothing to the world but an aggravating distraction lost in the cacophony of combat.
The UAC would like to thank you for your support during this transition. Your suffering continues to inspire us.
There's loads of collectible lore that skimming through shows there's a hell of a lot of backstory here, but as you already know and as I said, when it comes to Doom, I'm not really about this life. Doom Eternal features some brief moments of comic relief, but they are, again, kind of just interruptions to the action. But I'll give them more credit since some of them are quite funny. They did make Doom Guy talk though, and granted, it is only 2 lines and they heavily reflect how his dialogue worked in the Doom comics, but my god is it just stupid. I don't mind that Doom Guy is all about guns and fists and killing, as those are the tools he has to complete his job. But hearing that his thoughts are literally just that, like he has a f***ing caveman brain, just makes him so much more lame to me. It's not really at all how I wanted to view this otherwise mute character. But then, as is usually the case with the franchise for me, the story has always been more or less background noise to the combat and gameplay. So let's take a look at how the gameplay works now. And you might want to strap in for this part. It's going to take quite a bit to properly convey how I experienced this game. And I'm going to use this part of the video also to give some tips and tricks for people trying to get into the game, as I do think that will better explain how the new meta works. So, let's take a look at that now. Let me start by addressing Doom 2016's strength existed in just being able to pick up a gun and pew pew at enemies and their weak points until the entire wave of them had perished. In Doom Eternal, pew pew is not the forefront of the action, or rather pew pew to kill isn't, even though you will be pew-pewing to kill. What I'm trying to say is that Doom Eternal's combat revolves around you desperately needing to keep resources up, and so shooting is incidental to the task of keeping up your resources. Once you adjust to this new focus, the gameplay will click a lot more. It just might require you to unlearn a lot of what Doom 2016 had taught you. I'll explain more on that in a bit, but for now, let's start at the beginning. Doom Eternal does not start you off with a dinky pistol like 2016 did, and it doesn't start you off with waves of scrubs. If anything, in the first 30 minutes to an hour, Eternal manages to reach the same levels of intensity Doom 2016 ended on, feeling, in that sense, like a true direct continuation from where 2016 left off. We start immediately with a shotgun and are quickly granted our first upgrade. I chose sticky bombs as an alt fire, and it absolutely saved my life more times than I could count while I was still learning the ropes. I should also note here that there is no aim down sights in this game aside from the assault rifle's precision shot alt fire, and all alt firing is done by holding L2 while shooting with R2. So if you're really used to other modern shooters, this might take a little bit of adjusting to. You'll notice very early on that ammo seems incredibly limited in this game compared to the last, that enemies do considerably more damage, and health and shield replenishments are far more needed than ever before. This is where the game will force you to use all of its mechanics and play more strategically than you may be used to from first-person shooters. This is where you shift from viewing enemies as just being things to kill, to seeing them as being things to use while killing them. Health, armor, and ammo. These are the three primary resources you need to keep constantly in check, and the game gives you all the tools and enemies that you need to do it. We'll start with the ammo first, and I'll give you a couple pointers on how to handle its shortage. First of all, we do of course have ammo scattered throughout the stages that you can collect as you go, and much like the health and armor pickups, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Sure, the design of these is based on the older games, but in this world, they're glaringly ugly, which, to their credit, makes them hard to miss. Like me in a crowd of people, you can always spot the ugly one. You can also find the 12 hidden crystals that allow you permanent upgrades to health, armor, and ammo, as well as a couple new special skills. Or if you really struggle with ammo stock, you could even buy the suit perks that make exploding barrels drop ammo, and then invest in the upgrade that makes the barrels respawn once, so you can do it again. Your suit is upgraded through Praetor Suit Points, which can be found hidden throughout stages or gained by completing stage challenges, like killing so many enemies a certain way. There's more of these than needed, and like all collectibles, they're not hard to get if you just pay attention. Tangent. Since we're already on the topic of upgrades, you can get upgrades a third way by finding runes that give you more active combat abilities that work on cooldowns, like this neat slow down time while jumping ability I have here. And like all the other upgrades, they're very easy to find. By the time I completed the game, without much effort, I maxed my Praetor suit, got every crystal upgrade to my health, armor, and ammo, and I found every single rune. I also completed every single Slayer challenge, which are some of the game's most intense battles, that grant you Empyrean keys upon completing, so that you can unlock one of the most powerful guns in the game, the Unmaker. The only thing I didn't get was all of the hidden toys, as I am missing a couple. I missed a few soundtrack pieces, and didn't find enough of the hidden Sentinel batteries to unlock everything in the game's central hub. End tangent. Leveling up like this to fix your ammo problem can take time, and so that shouldn't be your solution. Most of it doesn't really help replenish your ammo anyway. It'll just make running out take slightly longer, and I do mean ever so slightly. What you need is a way to keep your ammo up, not a way to kick the can further down the street. Doom Eternal gives you the solution by way of the chainsaw. One of the biggest mistakes I see people making, and that I made myself early on, is that we either completely forget about the chainsaw, or we only turn to it when all of our weapons are completely out of ammo. The chainsaw is an integral part of combat. Killing a scrub with a chainsaw is a one-hit kill with no prerequisites beyond having some gas in the chainsaw. You can replenish gas with pickups, but the first block on the meter here is on a cooldown, and the cooldown does not take long at all. When you slay an enemy with a chainsaw, they just rain colors on you. Just showers and showers of ammo drops. Because of this, it's in a player's best interest to stop viewing scrubs as small enemies that need killing and start viewing them as ammo deposits. Don't wait until you're low or out of ammo to kill a scrub with your chainsaw. If your chainsaw has gas in it, go. Always. The scrubs are on an infinite respawn while an encounter is ongoing, and as a result, ammo in Doom Eternal is infinite as well. Once this clicked for me, it was a very, very rare case I ever ran out of ammo. And once you, the player, understands all this, you shouldn't be struggling with ammo either. You just need to survive the cooldowns, which, as stated already, aren't very long. For health and armor, these are a little different and may require you to do some leveling up. Or, of course, you could always just learn to play really well and not get hit, but that's easier said than done. Doomguy's shoulder cannon this time has two functions I found immensely useful: the ice bomb and the flamethrower. The ice bomb can be leveled up with predator suit points so that when dealing damage to frozen enemies, they drop health. The flamethrower, similarly, can be leveled up so that the enemies drop armor with every bit of damage done to them while burning. The best part of this is that you can freeze and burn enemies at the same time. Then, if you have a weapon that eats through enough bullets and doesn't do too much damage per shot, such as the chain gun with its mobile turret alt-fire, you can freeze and burn a large crowd of enemies at once, pepper them with shots, and watch the blue and green health and armor fireworks explode from their body. These two functions, the ice bomb and flamethrower, like the chainsaw before it, work on a cooldown, and as such are infinite in supply as well. So with this strategy, I was able to find a way to live like a god through the entire middle portions of this game. I did do a few other things to help myself out, however. When you do enough damage to an enemy, you'll see them stagger and glow orange and blue for a short period of time. During this time, you can get a gory kill on them, which can be used to get even more health pickups. After performing 2 gory kills, you will have charged something called the Blood Punch, which is essentially an AoE gory kill that does not require you to stagger enemies and can be used to get mass amounts of HP, provided you invested in the right perks and have a large enough crowd of people around you. Small warning though, I did at least once crash my game this way. I said earlier that sticky grenades helped me through a lot of the earlier stages, but no weapon came in more handy for me than the plasma gun with the shockwave alt-fire. So this is probably going to be my last big pointer here. The more you fire your plasma gun, the more you charge a shockwave. You don't even need to be hitting anything for it to charge. When charged, all you need to do is hit your alt-fire button, and a shockwave will go out around you that essentially works exactly the same as the Blood Punch. The Blood Punch is incredibly useful for crowd control and keeping enemies from getting too close. So between the Blood Punch and the Shockwave, you almost always have AoE attacks at the ready and can easily kill any small enemies around you while keeping the big ones back just far enough. All that said, you can't just rely on any one gun. Battles in Doom Eternal are relentless and intense. They're stacked from top to bottom with large enemies that require specific strategies to kill efficiently. So while focusing on keeping your resources up, you'll need to be making sure that you're picking the right weapons for the enemies you're targeting. Sticky bombs are incredibly useful for taking out turrets on arachnotrons and shoving down the throats of cacodemons. Blood Punch is necessary to remove the armor from a cyber mancubus, and from there you can target a mancubus's gun arms with any high-powered weapon to make them ineffective against you at long ranges, or just pepper their body with 3 rockets from your rocket launcher and call it a day. The super shotgun is immensely useful against the Marauders, but at the same time, the Marauders. They're the only legitimately god-awful enemy in the game. They completely break the flow of combat. Their moveset is immense and annoying, and their health pool is way too large. They also have a completely senseless rule set that seems in place just to give you a hard time, like their immunity to super weapons like the BFG. Side note, despite being immune to super weapons, apparently the super shotgun, the one with super actually in its name, is not a super weapon. so it is useful against the Marauders. With the Marauders, you can't stand too close to them, you can't stand too far away. You can't stand a comfortable distance because you need to dash to dodge their attacks, and they'll also summon a spectral dog to attack you from behind. They're just an utter shit show. Honestly, Marauders are harder than most of the game's actual bosses, but they're not a fun kind of hard, just annoying. Thankfully, you never have to fight more than one Marauder at a time, and Marauders and Archviles never appear in the same battle, so there's no worry of an Archvile resurrecting a Marauder. The devs probably knew such encounters would be too much to ask. But I digress. Marauders, I digress, but seriously, fuck them. Aside from that, I think we've covered the gunplay. The primary focus is on keeping resources up. Don't run out of ammo and don't die. Both of those things are a constant responsibility, and while you can say that's the case in all first-person shooters to some extent, Doom Eternal makes it your job more than any other first-person shooter I've ever played. What this boils down to is an insanely strategic approach to first-person shooter action, where every single split second you are making decisions and adjusting your battle plan on the fly. In the later portions of the game, they throw everything plus the kitchen sink at you, and I can safely say that it raised the bar on first-person shooters as a whole for me. At the start of the game, I was struggling because I hadn't learned how to use the mechanics to my benefit. Through the middle, I felt like a god, like nothing could stop me. At the end, I felt considerably more powerful than I did at the start, as I was more powerful in mind. But despite all my focus, the end game felt like a blur upon completing. I have never been more focused and more tested in a first-person shooter in all of my life, and it felt goddamn awesome. My hands were legitimately shaking upon finishing this, and my mouth had run completely dry. I was utterly mentally drained, and I loved it. In my roughly 20-hour runtime, there were times when I was so on edge, I was getting flashbacks to Sekiro. Yet, I didn't find this nearly as frustrating as I found Sekiro. I really can't recommend Doom Eternal enough. That is, unless you are a purist for how Doom 2016 played. It truly does push the limits of what is doable in the genre, while remaining beatable and fair. But that was the gunplay. Doom Eternal, much like how it forced more crappy story focus into the game, also forces some crappy platforming, and it's just... Nobody is playing Doom Eternal for the platforming action, and the platforming action in Doom Eternal won't open people up to the idea of doing so either. Jumping from bar to bar, dashing across long distances, this is considerably not Doom-like at all. And for the record, I do know what is and is not Doom. I mean, look. I'm wearing a Doom shirt. Look at all these Doom video games I own. I even own this replica gun, clearly from Doom. It's called the Super Doomer Boomer Consumer. It was in a spin-off, most of you guys probably wouldn't know it. In small amounts, it's okay, and in combat, it gives a versatility that is much needed considering the chaos and intensity. But in general, exploration a lot of the time feels kind of lousy and janky, especially the wall climbing. Clinging onto a wall is done with the same button as your melee attack, so a lot of the time, I end up just melee attacking a wall and falling to my death. Sometimes it feels like you automatically grab to walls, but it's very far from consistent. Some of the platforming fits in about as well as the game's pickups do. It can just be jarring and off-putting. But it is a small gripe in what I consider the funnest game of 2020 so far. Since I didn't mention it earlier, in the vein of things that don't really fit in, there are one-ups in this game which I believe marks a first for the franchise. I don't mind these, and they really do help out, but they feel more to me like they were implemented as an afterthought with the goal of easing players through the chaos, rather than a design choice they had from the beginning. So long as you have a free man, you will respawn in combat directly where you stand upon dying. Without free men, you load at your last checkpoint, which is usually right before the battle begins. They can cut down on tedium for the struggling players, but not so much that the struggling player won't be forced to get good, as they say. Anyway, that's the big chunk of the video out of the way, so let's look at some technicals now. On the graphical front, the game does look good, aside from the aforementioned health pickups and such, but it's not like it looks incredible. It doesn't have too much of a defined art style to help it stand the test of time, nor does it have extremely strong and detailed photorealism. It isn't pushing the level of detail we see in other games like Death Stranding or the Resident Evil remakes, but then that is because concessions need to be made to keep performance up and the frame rate clicking at a steady 60. This is one of those games where a high and stable frame rate is an absolute must, and for the most part, they hit it. On the rare occasion the game does suffer some slowdown, and this is usually tied to the sheer amount of stuff going on. If you blood punch too many people or cause too many resources to drop in a short amount of time, you may see some slowdown, or as I showed earlier, the game can even crash. This game does feel a little bit more like a Bethesda game than the last one did, and that's not really a good thing. Here and there, you'll see some unpolished areas, missing textures, geometry that you can see through, things loading in and out in weird ways. The game also struggles with some of its more complex geometry. If there's a wall or a slanted ground with a lot of protruding edges, simply interacting with it can cause the game to stutter a bit until you step away from said wall. It's rarely a necessity to bother with terrain like this, but if you're an explorer like me and like to just test where the invisible walls are, of which there are many in this game and often in disappointing places, you'll hit them a good amount as you play. I also ran into this random glitch here where a room in the central hub threw up an invisible wall and made it impossible for me to leave, causing me to have to cancel out of the game and reload my file. At this one other point, I jumped off the ledge here at the end of the battle before they could spawn me out of the arena, and in doing this, it caused the screen to go completely white. I could still move around and fire my gun, but I couldn't see anything. Thankfully, pausing and unpausing the game was enough to fix this, and it is kind of my own fault, but it still shouldn't happen. You can see other concessions made to keep the frame rate up as you look into the distance and see the resolution and texture quality dip substantially. Of course, only loading in as you get closer, but given how clearly you can see the quality drops, it can cause some of the game to look blurry or unsightly at times. Otherwise, it is quite stable, and it looks pretty darn good for how chaotic the gameplay gets. The sound design I thought was very good, aside from the sound of some of the pickups. The guns sound cool, the demon snarls and their breaking bones are sickly satisfying, and the sound of interacting with poles and launch pads are unquestionably fitting. There are some strange cartoon-esque sound effect choices like the cork pops on headshots, but given they clearly telegraph to the player what's going on in the grand cacophony of combat, I'll take it as a necessary and helpful evil. Had they chosen just another generic blood and guts explosion sound, then it would get too lost in the mix. It's really just the resource pickups that are jarring. Armor is especially bad, coming off as overly harsh and sharp on the ear. The OST is great like before, but I wouldn't rank it as high as Doom 2016's. The metal just simply doesn't feel like it drives as hard, but I will grant Eternal some additional credit for being more expansive. Doom Eternal's OST has a lot more variety than before, allowing different zones and events to hit certain atmospheres we didn't see before. Some of the tracks got me all like this, while others got me more like this. But I think that's probably all I have to say on this game. Doom Eternal might not be what the Doom 2016 purists were looking for, but I feel like it raises the bar considerably for the genre and for the franchise. It does this all with a refreshingly unique meta that doesn't quite lose the essence of what Doom games really are. If you like shooters at all and like the idea of navigating a maelstrom, then this isn't one to pass up. And just in closing, I know this is a bit of a normal game for the channel, and some of you might be shocked that I don't just play Japanese games or just, weird niche things. But a lot of you did say you wanted to hear my thoughts on it, and I didn't really have anything else planned, so here it is. Anyway, that's going to be all from me today, folks. If you guys like the video, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the video if you can. Links to all my socials are in the description below, and as always, folks, thanks for watching.